We broke up.
Yeah, we broke up.
Yeah, my daughter will be locked up until she's at least 25, so, you know.
And so a lot happened before you got to that moment. And if you weren't willing to address it, that's a lot.
Okay, so the whole point of cheating.
Hey, welcome. You're watching LED Live. It's a show where we use the light of Christ to expose the darkness found in media and our culture today. We took to social media asking you what questions you may have about singleness, dating, and marriage, and we're here to answer them.
Find out on this episode of LED Live.
Hey guys, my name is Michael and I'm single.
Hey, my name is Mikey and I'm married.
So my name is Brittany and I am single.
My name is Deborah and I have been married almost 25 years. In April it will be.
Hey, I'm Brad. I'm married and I'm happily married.
Hello, my name is Alex and I'm married and I'm very happy married.
I'm Keith. I'm married.
I'm Scotty. I'm happily married.
Hey, my name is Kendi and I'm single.
I'm Florence. I'm Kendi's mom and I'm second time single.
How's it going, Brad?
Good. We got hearts behind us.
I know.
All right, so I guess we're supposed to answer these questions.
All right. Why does it seem like God takes forever to find a mate for us?
This is a good question. I think there's a lot of variables there that you have to consider and trust in God. And sometimes He's building that trust. Like, do you really trust me?
Yep.
I think people would naturally treat God as a genie if it was just like, hey, I asked you, where's my stuff at? You know, where's my girl at? Where's this at?
Yeah.
God has much bigger plans for you, and He cares more about your salvation and your character and your personality than He does about you just having the desires of your heart.
Yeah.
That's why the Bible says, seek and you shall find me, right? And I will give you the desires of your heart. But the first part of that really is a seeking after God, and then God will honor you what you ask.
When we pray, thy will be done, it's God's will.
You gotta believe it.
He knows when we are emotionally ready, when we are physically ready, when we are spiritually ready, when we are mentally ready. And so a lot of times He doesn't give us what we want because we haven't done the background preparation. And we're really not ready. And if He gives us what we want, we're just going to mess up. And then we're going to blame Him because that's what usually happens. People always blame God for all the things that go wrong in their lives.
Joseph ended up being thrown. He was, had these dreams that he was going to be the Prince of Egypt, and he was thrown in a pit and put in jail for something he didn't do. But in the end, that's exactly where God was leading him. Like, nobody wants to be in the pit. Nobody wants to be in jail when you're innocent. Mm-hmm. And yet, if he wouldn't have went through those things, how would he have ever ended up where he ended up, where he was able to save many nations from starvation? Good things come to those who wait and who trust God. I believe that.
We're very impatient people. It's why we have things like Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
That's right.
2
That's
days.
right.
I need it now.
Yeah. It didn't show up on my doorstep. Come on.
Assess yourself and see, okay, do I like living with me? If I was somebody else, would I enjoy living with me? This is the time to make those kinds of changes. And like Paul said, he has come to the point where in every situation, every state he finds himself, he has learned to be content.
Yeah.
And so if this is your season of singleness, I say, enjoy it.
All right.
Is it possible for a couple to get spiritually attacked while having God at the center of their relationship? 100% yes.
Yes.
When you become a Christian, look, Satan's not out there attacking the world. He's already got them. He's going after the Christians. It says in Revelation, it says that the dragon was wroth with the woman. This is all symbolic. The dragon is Satan. The woman is the church, the body of believers. He's going after those who keep the commandments of God and have the faith and testimony of Jesus Christ. So when you become a Christian, prepare to have a target on your head, because you're enemy number one in Satan's eyes.
Right.
When you're drinking and partying and having fun with your friends, he's not going to mess with you. Imagine if he spiritually attacked one of those people, they'd be like, well, I didn't believe in God, but now I do, and Lord help me. He's only going to push people to God.
Right.
But when you become a Christian and a believer, be prepared for battle. It's a very dangerous idea to think, oh, I'm a Christian, I can't be attacked.
Just because you are in the boat with Jesus doesn't mean that there's not going to be a storm.
Yeah.
I think that you should always be on your guard. And yes, the devil's main motive is divide and conquer. He's going to attempt to come into your home, divide and conquer.
And spiritually attacked doesn't mean you're overcome.
Oh yeah, of course, trials, they come. And remember, trials is the opportunity to develop character.
Yeah. Was Job ever he was spiritual. He was very close to God, but he was attacked too. So just because you're doing everything right and you're close to God and you've had a successful relationship, marriage, doesn't mean you're not going to get attacked.
I think, though, that one factor, too, is you are going to be attacked, and not just in your marriage, but in your finances and with your kids and with this and that. I think that one of the powerful things that gets attacked is unity, because unity is huge. If it's just squabbling over money and who left their shoes out, if he can keep you in dissension, it doesn't matter how petty it is, you never arrive at that place of spiritual unity. So the antidote, though, is when the attack comes, to get in unity and to stand against the attack together.
Right. Should a guy wait until he can provide financially before courting? Oh, that's a great question.
I think you have an answer for that.
I just think that's a great question.
Yes.
Right now in China, it's like, if you want to get married to a woman, most likely, I'm not talking about 100%, but most likely, over 50%. Women are looking for, first, you can afford a house. You have to have a house, basically, and a car. A car, a house, without those, don't even talk. Don't even talk about marriage.
You know, when my wife and I were getting married, her goal was to have her car paid off. I had saved up some money. She had saved up some money. But it's not like we were financially independent. We were just debt-free. Didn't owe school, didn't owe on our cars, didn't owe anybody anything. So what it allowed us to do is get some furniture and a few things like that when we got married. But if we'd have waited till it was like, okay, I have this awesome job where I make so much a year, that'd have been forever coming. In fact, she had a better job when we got married than I did. The reason that's a tricky question, and it's a bit loaded, because you can make less money. As long as you're out of debt, you can be doing better than people who are making more money and are in debt.
Right.
The whole point of courting or dating is to be married. And if you can't support yourself in marriage, why in the world are you preparing for this?
Honestly, I think dating is expensive and it costs money to go out to do things. Probably. I don't know.
When you're building a house, the first thing you put in is the foundation. And based on the strength of the foundation, that house will stand or fall when storms come. Now, similarly, the foundation that goes into a relationship determines the strength of the relationship. So if you have a strong foundation financially, emotionally, spiritually, and all the other areas, then your house, your relationship will stand. Somewhere I read the statistics saying that the number one reason marriages break up is because of money.
Finances, that's true. But from a biblical perspective, when we go back to the ideal, God's ideal, found in the Garden of Eden in Genesis, God gave Adam a home, the Garden of Eden. He gave him a job to dress and keep the garden. And all of that was set in place before Eve was put into the picture. Adam had his purpose. He had a way to provide for his family, and then his family was given to him. Not necessarily because of my age, of course. I don't expect the person to have their dream job or be able to provide for an entire family, but they should be able to be in a good place at least to keep themselves before we get started. And I have the same standard for myself. I think that I should be able to be independent and be able to stand on my own 2 feet and have my own personal connection with Christ and know about myself before I join with anyone.
Yeah. And when we read the Bible and we see what God says about the husband should be a provider for his family.
Right.
The man has to imagine that the lady who he's going to be proposing to, who will be his wife, is not in a position to hold down a job. Because in any situation, something could go wrong, and then you have to be the full provider. In any case, he should be the full provider. If you find a lady who has a job and is bringing on, that's gravy.
Okay.
You know,
I love it.
The man is supposed to be the provider. That's his God-given role.
Right.
And so if you are not yet prepared to be that in totality, go and find a way to become the person who can fully provide for a family before you propose to anybody to join your life.
Okay, yes, I think he needs to be financially stable. Now, if there's things that he's working towards, I think that's fine because we're not married.
Yeah.
You know,
like
but
if you're in
he's
college
just,
or
if he's-
pursuing
right,
something. Yeah.
but if he's just content, just like not
Playing
doing
video games at
anything-
mama's house.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
don't even get me started on that one.
That's another
trigger for
episode,
me.
isn't it?
Yeah, but if he's working towards something, I think, yeah, that's fine.
Is having relations on the Sabbath right or wrong for married couples?
Relations?
I'm
I can
gonna,
only read
I'm,
into that.
yes,
I'm
I'm
gonna
gonna
read
bet
into
that this is a PG-13
audience
or question here, so we won't get graphic. This was a nice way of putting that. But having relations, being intimate with your spouse on the Sabbath, what do you feel? What do you think about that? I love the Sabbath.
Yeah.
It's a great day.
Y'all crack me up. Well, I don't have an answer for this one.
Whatever the Bible is silent on, I don't take it upon myself to play God and tell people what is right or wrong.
Okay.
Read the Bible, pray and ask God what your question is, and let the Holy Spirit direct you.
That's good.
Without being graphic, I think the illustration that God has given us in to consummate a marriage, right? There's an illustration like the Jewish sanctuary. I mean, you are the priest of the household in that same sense as the priest was to the Jewish sanctuary system, and the only person that was allowed in that most holy place was the priest. You are the priest of your household, and you should be the only person that's allowed in that space. And so I don't think God would be like, I gave you all these illustrations to understand these deeper spiritual things, but you can't, enjoy that. Now, I'm going to say that, preference that with, I think that if that's your only focus in that day, the day is really supposed to be spent with God. And if that's really what your whole mind and singular focus is all about, then that might not be a good idea. But I personally don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, me either.
In the creation story, God created for 6 days, and then he rested on the Sabbath. But man was created on day 6, man and woman.
Oh.
What was the first command he gave Adam and Eve? He said, be fruitful and multiply. That was the first commandment he gave Adam and Eve on day 6. So, I mean, I don't imagine the next day they were like, oh, we got to stop that. It's the Sabbath. I think it's a gift from God, and why would a gift from God be condemned on the Sabbath? It actually says in the marriage, the bed is undefiled.
I think that I don't think it has anything to do with the Sabbath, and then there's definitely no spiritual guidance on stuff like that. I think that God made sexuality to procreate and to enjoy, and I think we're depicting some intimate connection with him when we are intimate. And so I think, why would he be put off by that on the Sabbath? Because it's a portrayal, like I say, of Christ in the church. It's depicting an intimacy with Christ. He designed it. Why would that be taboo on a certain day?
Right.
So the principle of the Sabbath is to spend time with God. But I don't believe that you can't spend time in that way and manner with your wife on the Sabbath either. Where I think it becomes dangerous and this might be not for everybody, but having relations with your spouse on Sabbath can tend to make you sleepy as well, and so you might miss the Sabbath completely. And if you miss that Sabbath blessing, you can't miss the Sabbath blessing every Sabbath, even though that might be the time when you get to spend the most time with your wife or husband. I don't know.
Well, I'm glad you answered because I answered about the pastor, so I'm not answering back.
This is good. I'm just like, this is bonding. Yeah. Okay, so when marrying, is legally through the court sufficient? So if I was like, hey, Ma, like, I just want to go to the justice of the peace and done deal.
Well, you know what I would do? I've heard this question asked a few times, and what I think is the better question is, if you want to marry someone, why wouldn't you want to tell the world? If you love someone so much, why wouldn't you want to not only have a court marriage, but also have a marriage ceremony with everyone else in it, so that you can share your love for the other person?
I think that people are very diverse, and I think that what some people having a big wedding would give them a nervous breakdown. They would loathe every second of it. And weddings tend to bring out the devil in a lot of people in the wedding party. I don't know what that is, but I think that the reason we have a legal ceremony with documentation and all of that is because, you know, Adam and Eve were not married in the way that we are married. They never had any ceremony or witnesses or anything except God. There was no certificate of marriage for them. But the legal ramification came along because I think it was God's protection on women, actually. Because if a man just didn't like his wife and wanted to get rid of her, he could just send her out homeless and with nothing, and he could just take another woman. But when there's that legally binding contract recognized by the court and by God, now there's accountability.
I think the court recognizes the marriage for reasons of keeping order in the country and things like that, right? And I think that you don't necessarily have to get married in a church, but then I think the flip side of that coin is you don't have to get married in a courthouse or anything like this to really, in God's eyes, be married.
Sure.
I would think if you go to the church and stand before your family and a pastor and make a promise to God that I will forever stay with this person through sickness and in health till death do us part, that's more official than a government paper.
But what about if
I'm not saying you shouldn't
But
do
what
that.
about there's no church?
I've heard it put that going to the courts is like giving Caesar what's to Caesar, and then when you do it in a church, it's giving God what is God. But, I mean, God isn't in the church building. He's omnipresent. So just thinking about the time that we're living in and how things have been shut down, or, you know, what if families aren't able to come and gather, having a kind of ceremony, even if it's within the courts, I think it's fine. You're still making that declaration, that commitment to that person in the face of God. Maybe you can invite a pastor there or loved ones there, and I think it's fine. I think it's sufficient.
You can pray.
It's binding.
I mean, you can pray before. It is binding. The state considers it binding. Mm-hmm. If something should happen to your spouse, they expect you to fill in and to take responsibility and do whatever that's necessary. So it is binding.
Yeah.
Marriage is not about the day in celebration, and we know that because so many people are divorced that spent thousands of dollars on their ceremony.
Right.
I think that it's a heart condition, and it's an exchanging of a covenant, and it's an understanding of when this day is over, I have this lifetime commitment with this person. So I think that all of the fanfare and stuff is completely individualized, but I think that the certification in the court is what makes it legal before God and man. So I definitely think that's sufficient. I just think that, the rest of the stuff is personal preference and culture and a lot of things like that.
What do you have to say about how Jesus said marriage isn't for everyone?
Well, that kind of takes the pressure off, doesn't it?
Matthew 19:11 and 12.
I mean, it's Jesus. I mean, if he said it's not for everyone, it's not. He knows what he's talking about. He made the first pair and married them, so it's true.
But he said unto them, all men cannot receive this saying, save they to whom it is given. For where there are some eunuchs which were so born from their mother's womb, there are some eunuchs which were made eunuchs of men, and there be eunuchs which have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He that is able to receive it, let him receive it.
What does it mean to be a eunuch?
A eunuch is someone who isn't married, but from my understanding, a eunuch also is someone who doesn't have genitalia. Because I know in the courts, the men were made eunuchs so they couldn't procreate with the king's wife or concubines. So the men who worked in the court were made eunuchs. It's sort of like castrating someone.
Okay.
Like it took me a while to even figure out if marriage is something that I even want for my own life. That is something I'm still trying to figure out, because I feel like there's a really, especially in the church, there's like a toxic, like you have to get married, and if you don't, you're a failure type of culture in the church. So, but Jesus and Paul, unfortunately, they are men. They're not women. But they were fulfilled without being married. You know, like they were pursuing their life's purpose. It wasn't like it's mandatory for you to be married in order to live the life that God wants you to live, you know?
Back then, marriage was very high on the totem pole. Everyone was expected to get married. Every woman was expected to have children, and on top of that, they were expected to have a boy first. So it was a lot of pressure. So I think when Jesus came, he really tried to remove some of the weight that was placed on traditional things. And I believe that was one of them.
And they say Jesus doesn't care about women. That's liberation right there.
I think that if I'm remembering the context right, and I may not be, but I know that Jesus, when the disciples were talking about divorce, and they were like, you know, Moses said we could just write a thing of divorce and get rid of our woman. And Jesus said, you know, only in the case of adultery and all of that. And then they were like, well, who, you know, should get married? And he said, it's not for everybody. I think he was really bringing home our casualness about marriage and our lack of understanding that it's covenant and it's sacrificial. And he was just putting it back to them like, if you think marriage is just a time to use a woman and get rid of her when you're done with it, it's probably not for you. I mean, he was just making it very cut and dried of what marriage is and is not. And I think some of single people read those verses and they get really nervous, like, oh no, God's called me to be a eunuch. But I think that, you know, the eunuchs that were forced to be that way by man, you know, I know that in the days where the kings had a harem and all of that, they would castrate the males that were over the harems because they didn't want them producing an offspring that wasn't the king's. And so I know that there are certain, you know, things, and you're also talking about when the Bible was written, a culture that we might not even be living out of today. But some people, like you said, you know, they don't desire that because God has put something else in their heart. And marriage is not a purpose, it's a partnership, you know, and sometimes being married can hinder your purpose.
Right.
If you're called to go to China to missions and you marry somebody whose family is here and their roots are here and they just want a normal life and job, you may never fulfill your purpose and you may choose that marriage over the fulfillment God had for you.
I think having the Holy Spirit guide you in that is very important too, because you could very well just be in this mindset, you're just like, okay, I need to get married, and then you get married with the wrong person.
Absolutely.
And then it takes a lot to recover from, and just to get your life back to heal. So yeah, that's definitely something that needs just like Holy Spirit guidance. And if that's something that God puts on someone's heart, I do believe that God will fulfill that by bringing a person.
Right.
But I think there are some people who know like, it's not really for me, and that's totally okay.
Yeah.
Wow. How can single people 35 plus years old manage their expectations?
I think that when you get older, you get more set in your ways. At least I am now. I feel like, you know, I'm into my 40s and I know what I want. I know what I like, what I don't like, and you know, I'm not as wishy-washy as I was in my early 20s. And so I think some of the challenges of that is to find somebody that fits into that model of everything that you've gotten used to is a hard sell. That's a hard person to find. When you're younger, you're more pliable, you're more bendy. You guys can grow together. You haven't quite figured out your finances yet. You haven't quite figured out some of these milestone things. But when you start to get into the older ages, I think your focus is becoming more narrow, and it's hard. It's going to be harder for you to make those adjustments. Not saying it's impossible, just saying that it's harder. So if you're 30, 35 years old and you really feel called to marriage, I would really sit down and say, God, is this in your design for me? And if it is, help me to really have an open heart and an open mind to it, and help me not to be so rigid with the way that I've, ordered my life.
I think that maybe discouragement can come in, and you think, what's wrong with me? I'm this age and I'm still single. And so I think that, there's a lot of different factors in relationships, and not everybody that's in a relationship is happy. I think that sometimes we can discount singleness and think that that's a mark against us or a sign of inferiority or rejection. And really, Paul was thrilled to be single.
Right.
I mean, he was like, y'all that are married, y'all gonna have some trouble, and he had some trouble too. He was shipwrecked and beaten and those kind of things, but not by a spouse. So I think that one expectation is that everybody has to be in a relationship. I just think that's not true. And some people are very free to do things they'd never be able to do if they were in a relationship.
You got to start settling at some point.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying,
lowered expectations.
Any woman, as long as it's a woman.
Oh, I see the question. Yeah.
Just a joke.
Be realistic.
Yeah. That's a joke on the Chinese internet.
Oh, yeah?
They're saying, when you get older, and just anybody, as long as it's a woman.
You're older, are you female? All right.
Are you a female? All right.
Single then?
Nah, just kidding. Nah. I think you still need some expectations.
Yeah.
Still have to find the right person.
Don't lower your expectation of finding a spouse with the same beliefs. Stick with that.
Right.
But maybe not looking for the supermodel.
Right.
Because realistically, that's superficial. We're all going to start looking ugly and old anyway at some point.
That's what my mother told me.
Oh, okay.
She's like, when you're getting older, you can't just go for like good looking girls or that stuff. You want to think of how you spend the rest of life with her. She has to have a good quality.
Good advice.
If you have the expectation, you better be prepared.
What do you mean by that?
The first thing the person needs to do is, okay, I am expecting to be married. I want to be married. Am I ready for marriage?
Okay.
So you need to take the time and look at your personality, your temperament, and all of that.
Golly,
do the self. Yes. A lot of people, age does not determine maturity.
Ah, that's true. That's very true.
I've seen some 60-year-old people who never grew up. And so you want to make sure that at 35 or whatever age you are beyond that, take time to reflect and assess yourself. Am I really ready for marriage? Do I have the personality, the temperament to accept someone else's view over mine if we come into some type of dispute? And just look at the different things that come with marriage. Am I ready to give up my will for some other person or for a child who may come? Assess yourself. So that's one. You have time to assess yourself. And the other thing is, one way of managing your expectation is to be open-minded and try new ways of meeting people. You can't stay in your house all day and expect that God's going to drop some man in your house.
Right.
You got to be places where there are people. And so you have to find yourself where those people are. And now there are quite a few singles ministries who have online programs. They have online socials and speed dating or whatever they call them. But they're there. Look for them.
What do you do when your partner cheats on you? Because if that happens to me, I'm going to divorce.
Yeah. Personally, for me, if my partner would cheat on me, I don't think there's a going back, because you broke my trust. I will never be able to have
Yeah.
peace and trust you again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that's like that's a no-brainer for me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it sounds like you've already made up your mind.
Marriage is so intimate and so covenant, and you're trusting your entire self to another person, and it's very vulnerable and very, very personal. And for someone who probably already has trust issues and it took them forever to even arrive at that point with their spouse, their trust towards them might be so damaged.
This is a very, very case by case hard thing to say. There's this hard and fast rule. This is the way you should do it, and if this happens to you, this is how you'd react. I guess I'll frame it in the way that I guess I would hope I would react, with love and compassion, and like, let's get to the bottom of why this happened and try to resolve it.
Wow, it's a heavy one. Well, I believe God gave us the principle of forgiveness. When the other persons come to you and say, you know what, I really, from my bottom of my heart, and I'm sorry, we can see also a nice forgiveness, a nice, like I say, like a principle that you see that the couple, they come together and they say, you know what, now my relationship with my spouse is stronger than before.
I keep going back to the spiritual component of marriage, right? We have committed adultery on God so many times with so many different things. We've chased after other gods. We've made everything our idol. And, God is so quick to forgive us and ask for us to come back and return to him. And so I think the first and foremost thing I would do if I got into a situation like that, either found out my wife was cheating or caught her cheating or something like that, it would drop me to my knees on a probably large scale throughout the day, all the time. And I would just, hopefully I would latch onto God and just say, you've got to show me how to make it through this. Because if it's left up to me and I'm just going to react off my emotions, I would probably make that decision as well. Like, I don't want to be with this person. I don't think there's any fail-safe thing to do that would 100% be like fireproof insurance against that happening in your marriage. But I'll tell you what, one thing I believe that would really significantly help your odds out is if you had God as the third leg in your marriage.
Yep. The beautiful thing too about God is if you look at the book of Revelation, the way he describes his bride, his church, is a pure woman.
Yeah.
He doesn't even see her, and in reality, she's been cleansed, she's been restored, she's been renewed. And so God is, I think, showing us a picture that yes, this is how the church or Israel has treated me, but I can make that situation new again, and you can be as pure as if nothing ever happened.
That's that would be the hardest thing for me to overcome if I'm gonna really need to it's either the Lord changes whatever this is inside of me, or I'm just gonna really need to find someone who is compatible in the sense of being really loyal, being self-disciplined, and wanting to get to the root of an issue. Like, if there's something that I'm doing that makes you feel that you need to step out, or if there's something you're struggling with, or some relationship that's there, and you don't pause and try to figure it out, or come to me and let's work it out, and it gets to the point where the action happens, because people don't just fall into cheating. It's a process. And so a lot happened before you got to that moment. And if you weren't willing to address it, that's a lot.
Okay, so the whole point of cheating, from a man's perspective, doesn't have to be anything wrong with his relationship at home.
Okay.
Because men just love the conquest. When you make sure that you have the kind of communication and you treat each other as a king and a queen, this, for ladies, when you treat a man the way that, when you tell him what to expect ahead of time, and then when you you come through and you treat him in that way, you show him respect, you make sure that you go with him, you do the things that he likes, whatever it is you decide on. That you need to know how to hold this person in such a way that they will never think of another woman the way that they think about you. So that's one. But it's not impossible for you to be doing everything necessary and somebody still goes and cheats, because most men don't think I'm going out there to cheat. They go and they find themselves in some situation, and because they're very visual, one thing leads to another.
One thing leads
to another. For a lot of men, you listen to men talk, and they'll tell you they love their wife deeply. They didn't mean to cheat, whatever happened. So if you notice in the Bible, that's really the only thing that Jesus specified, the only reason he gave for divorce. He specifically mentioned it. Now, there are other reasons that people get divorced for that I believe God accepts. However, he actually mentions that one. When you commit adultery or fornication, you're sinning against your own body. And that is why it's so hard for women to take that. Because when women bond with men, they give their whole self over to this person.
Yeah.
So when the man goes and bonds with another woman in the same way,
you bringing it back into her bed,
it's as though they have killed that woman, that wife.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the one reason God says, if that happens, divorce the guy. However, if you can find it in your heart to work through it,
yeah.
What I have found from people who've gone through that, the relationship actually becomes stronger thereafter.
Wow.
I've heard that those marriages can sometimes be even better off down the road than they were in the past. And maybe sometimes it takes something like that to stoke the fire and break everything and then rebuild it back up. But I would seek counsel for God, counsel from, maybe a spiritual mentor, a pastor, or somebody like that, family members. And I would be very cautious not to tell a ton of people. Human nature, how it is, they find out one person's cheating, and then all of a sudden it's like, especially if you're in a church setting, the whole church is going to turn on that person. What happens if you get back together with them, So
now, there are some men who will still go and do it again because that's the example they had when they grew up with a father who was a philanderer. And that is why you need to know people's backgrounds before you marry them.
That's right.
Because a lot of times people do what they grew up with because they think that's how things are done. And they may not think it on a conscious level, but it's in their subconscious. And your subconscious directs your behavior most of the time. I also think that perspectives change as you age and as you experience life and as you see life happen to other people.
More grace.
So it's up to you and God. God knows what you can bear, and he doesn't hold it against any woman who decides, I'm divorcing you because you are unfaithful.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that feel like, that's the make or break. That's the unpardonable sin of marriage. You cheat on me, it's over. But I've heard so many testimonies, including Eric Wilson's on The Dragon Revealed. If you watch that story, he actually divorced his wife. They were Christian, married, had 2 kids. One was in diapers, and one day he just walks in and says, I want a divorce.
Wow.
His wife was just floored, almost fainted, just never saw it coming. She's like, we're Christian, we don't get divorced. He signed the divorce papers. She tried to fight that, but only could for so long. Then he was in his own apartment with different girlfriends, and she'd knock on the door, and his girlfriend would answer, and she'd be like, I need to speak to my husband. And she'd say, you don't have a husband. And she'd say, yeah, I do, because God doesn't believe in divorce. And he'd come to the door and he'd cuss her out at the top of his lungs and say, get out of my life, you're ruining my life. But she clung to these promises. She had handwritten promises about how what God joins together, no man can separate. And it was really about his salvation, his walk with God, because if he was really walking with God the way he should have, he wouldn't have even done those things. He wouldn't have wanted to break a covenant with God, with his wife. He wouldn't have wanted to have girlfriends living with him. And so she prayed those for 5 years. And after 5 years, he called her up. And he tells me, he says, Mikey, if she would not have prayed those promises, I would never be back in this marriage. He said, I had no reason to come back. He said, I hated her. She was ruining my life. But she kept praying those promises. And it's called intercessory prayer. It's when you intercede for someone who's been blinded by the enemy. The Bible talks about those who have been blinded. Their hearts, their minds have been blinded by the God of this world. and it's literally a spiritual warfare. You've opened up the gate to allow the enemy to have a foothold, and he's influencing you in a way. Who are you to say that sin is any worse than any sin that you've been forgiven for? Jesus said, forgive those who persecute you, pray for those who persecute you, love your enemy even. This is spiritual warfare. When somebody has demons influencing their life, they're not even in control anymore. That's literally not them. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. That battle is not against you and your spouse. That's against a spiritual host of wickedness. And the only way you can fight that battle is on your knees. Pray to God, say, Lord, go in there and save my spouse, and intercede for them. Say, Lord, they're blinded. Lord, forgive them for wanting to break covenant. Forgive them for infidelity and adultery. Lord, forgive them for the things they're doing in their life. And if you really, truly loved your spouse and made a covenant to God, then no sin should stand in the way of that, because we've all sinned. We've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And we can all be forgiven. We can all be transformed and changed, and every past sin is washed away, even the sin of infidelity and adultery.
So I think that even if you do not stay married, that doesn't mean that you have to be bitter or resentful or forever damaged by that person. You can have the marriage end and still forgive that person and still allow God's love to heal you and to show kindness towards them. But that's a very different thing than staying in the relationship.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
All right. What is a good way to maintain a healthy relationship when it's long distance?
Ha! Don't do it.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Oh, well, I had an experience on that because...
Did you meet her on the internet?
No, it's
Oh.
like in China
Oh, okay.
before I came here.
Wow.
So, yeah,
How'd
we
it go?
broke up. But
Yeah, we broke up.
long distance is hard.
Yeah.
Especially in my situation, it's not only long distance, it's also like it's two different countries.
Mm.
There's a time zone difference. When mine here is daytime, it's about nighttime
Oh, wow.
there. So
What did you think about that relationship? Where do you think the future of that could have gone? How would you, the perfect scenario for that to have worked
is
out?
to like when get to work when we have work, when we can afford, when I can afford like take her come to America. And that's kind of my...
Did she want to leave China, leave her family and all that?
At that time, yes. After broke up, no. So when we are fighting, no.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you are in love, yes.
Yeah.
I don't think it's out of the scope of a good beginning. Just because it's long distance, I wouldn't avoid those right off the bat. But there are some challenges that will ensue because of that.
I do not encourage long distance relationships at all.
Well,
They don't work. In my experience, I've not seen one that has worked well.
same. I think the most ideal when it comes to long distance is for it to start with you guys together. Mm-hmm. And then if something comes up, maybe they get a job or it just happens that then it becomes long distance. That's better because at least you had that time before at the initial phase of the relationship to really get to know who this person is. Seeing how precious time is. I had a really close friend. She got into a relationship with someone long distance for like 9 months. And finally, after 9 months, they were able to meet. So she went and she met with him. And first time she got in the same space, she was like, oh no, this is not going to work. And, the person was a great texter, a great person on the phone, but super awkward in person. And he was a great person, but she knew that long term that wasn't really going to work because it was obvious that was just who he is. He wasn't going to change. But 9 months of your life is gone. You've created this tie, this connection with someone, and it just falls apart when now you're meeting together and this is supposed to be the rest of your life. You're going to be together with this person for the rest of your life if you decide to tie the knot with them. So no, I would say the other way around. Start together, make sure you're good together and then separate, then start separated and then wait till you can come together. I just don't like wasting my time.
And the whole thing is dating and courtship is getting to know the person and getting to know the person under varying circumstances. So how do you do that? I mean, one of the things that I told you I learned as a teenager, one of my instructors, he used to tell the people who went to him for marriage counseling, show up at your fiance's house at 6 o'clock in the morning and see how their face looks.
Right.
Or say something deliberate because that you know is going to make them really, really angry, and watch their response or reaction.
So like you go out date,
Right.
you know their
go
habits.
Out to a restaurant and see if they cuss out the waiter or if they're real polite.
Yeah,
or whatever.
exactly. Those like details.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's one thing to see their face. Some of us can have a poker face.
That's right.
But your body doesn't lie. So when you're talking to people, you have to learn to read body language. How do you do that long distance?
Right.
You can't do that.
Someone could tell you, yeah, I'm great with money, but then you go shopping with them and they splurge their whole paycheck. You wouldn't have known that unless you were with them. Go out to eat. How do they treat the waiter? How do they treat their family? You should see that, not just hear. It's good to hear stories. You should develop a trust with that person, but seeing is evidence for sure.
Yep.
Actions speak louder than words.
Definitely.
Anyway,
So,
sorry if you're in a long distance and you were really looking to see how to make it healthy. But another way to answer this, fine, if that's just how it is, because there are people, this does work for some people. They met online far away and they come together and it works out, and they're happy for years to come. What I've heard is that the best thing is communication.
What's a good way to maintain a healthy relationship? I would say share. That's one of the most important. You guys, you two are not together, but you wanted to make it feel like you're together. The way to do it is to share. Share what happened to you. Share share your thoughts, share
Communication.
Yeah, communication. Like even small things, even little things. You miss something, you're happy, you're sad. You want to share your emotions, share your thoughts, share your stuff. Just pretend that they're together with you.
I like that answer.
I think the main point, if you're gonna have that kind of relationship, is trust. Putting the trust. I mean, it's something like a peace of mind. When you love the person, you say, I trust you, and I believe the other person is gonna look at it. If that person loves you, he's gonna say, "Wow, I mean, 100% trust." I was like, "Wow, I mean, that's so cool."
But it does challenge you to express love in different ways, and I think that's super important. To learn, like, what is it like if someone likes quality time, how are you going to be creative to meet that need of theirs, to make them feel loved? Or if it's words of affirmation, that one's probably the easiest one. Or gifts, there are different ways to express, hey, I really like you, I really care about you.
Yeah, I'd say keep the communication high.
Yeah.
It's just like it is with God. A good, healthy relationship is in communication.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not communicating with God through reading His Word, through prayer, things like that, it's not going to be a healthy relationship anyway, even if it's long distance or close distance.
Right.
So, I remember when I was interested in my wife, like on break and stuff, winter break and things like that, we'd get on Instant Messenger, remember those AIM and what was the one for MSN Messenger and stuff like that? It's probably dating ourselves, but...
Yeah.
But ICQ and things like that, or email, we were in the habit of communicating that way in the beginning, and then as things got more serious, on the phone every night and stuff. So
travel back and forth like once a month or something, or twice a month, just to make sure that they see each other. Bible reading plans together, like devotional together and stuff, and just kind of focus on building their relationship with God together.
But you know what? I think that raises an interesting point. There's some advantages to long distance relationships. And I think that one of them is if you eliminate the physical, which is so distracting and can get you caught up where you're so focused on the attraction and the connection and the physicality that you don't build the time developing the stuff that's going to sustain over the long haul. And when you remove that element where it's not even possible, you're forced to get to know somebody's heart and to know who they really are and all that without the physical element. And I think that that's an advantage that can be really leveraged. But I also think if you're in a long distance relationship, it begs the question, if we become serious and want to marry, how do we bridge the gap? Is one person going to move and give up their life? And if so, who? And is that going to cause animosity in the future? And is somebody going to feel like they always sacrifice to be with the other? And eventually there is going to be a bitterness. And I think that, you know, if somebody's in the military, that's a very different thing. But if somebody just has a job and a life established elsewhere, that's a huge challenge. And I think that you kind of want to have that conversation early on and have that kind of stuff decided, because you could be wasting years of your time if you're not ever going to make that connection and get married and move together. You know, if that's never going to happen, you're just keeping each other company, you know. And that's okay if that's what everybody knows and expects.
I think there's this motivation to do everything you can to create the foundations that you were saying before, so that you can go and see that person, or maybe build such a life where they can come to you and you guys can prosper together. So that might be even more of to stoke to, hey, let's get this process going. Then it's easy to get kind of settled or stagnant when you're in the same place. Does that make sense?
But I think the whole online dating thing and getting to know people through distant communication works better for more matured people. I don't think that would work for younger people.
What you mean by mature? Like 23 is mature?
No. Sorry. I think beyond 35, you probably could handle that better, because by then your frontal lobe is fully developed. Your sense of reasoning and just judgment is a lot better. It's in place. So you can handle things in a different space, headspace, mentally, than the one who's younger.
Okay. What is the issue with dating or marrying someone who is of a different faith?
Oh, great question, because that's like what happened to me. When I met my wife, it was different denomination. So it is a big issue, let me tell you. Because let me tell you, marriage is not just a few years, but it's for eternity. And you need to find out really, you need to pray and fast, knowing that after almost 21 years of marriage, and faith is so important in our lives. And it was very difficult the first years of my marriage.
When faith is so important to you, it becomes one of the big issues in your marriage, because you want you and your wife to be on the same page as each other. And if you can't decide on basic things, that faith oftentimes is you know, has some things that are hard rules. And some denominations, some churches, some faiths don't really abide by those, and others do, and so it causes tension. And you are as one with someone else. So it's hard for your marriage to continue.
I think when you marry, you're not just marrying that person, you're marrying their family.
You are.
And, you know, if you are in different denominations, which have some very different lifestyles, I mean, some worship on different days, some have different eating habits, some have, you know, a wide variety of differences than even the same faith in Christianity. And that can be a rub.
It's not biblical. Straight up, don't be unequally yoked. And that takes different forms. Being of a different faith is one of them.
Having said that, there are situations where a person, you might have two people that are atheist, one of them becomes Christian, they're already married. That doesn't mean you divorce the other person. You know, I would say it's not wise, given what the Bible says, to seek out another person who is not at least Christian. Now, in the whole denominational scope, there are varying viewpoints. I know there are people who feel very strongly like you should only marry within your denomination. It's probably ideal. I don't know that it's a guarantee that it's going to work out. Just like it's not a guarantee that it won't work out the other way. There are, I think largely it's about odds, right? You know, odds are if you marry in your denomination, you are more than likely going to be on the same page, multiple levels, and things are going to be okay. But it's not a guarantee for success in your marriage. There's so many other variables. In my life, my wife was not the same denomination as I was when we got married. So that was tricky on multiple levels. She was a Christian. I knew she was Christian. She was a committed Christian. It's interesting. I heard a preacher once say that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob all took their wives from the areas that we know as Babylon. It doesn't mean that they were Babylonian in their lives or thinking, because they were all godly women, right? But they happened to be in a different geographical space. So the way I have a tendency to look at that is there are people who are searching and seeking, and they love God with all their heart, and they may not be in your denomination, but it doesn't mean that God isn't leading and working on them along the way.
If you're a believer and you get with somebody that's a non-believer, you think there's going to be conflict in the house? Like, well, why can't they watch this spiritualism on cartoons? And be like, because the Bible says it. Bible, who cares? You know, I could definitely see there be a lot of conflict, a lot of disagreements. How to raise your children, what you should and shouldn't do as a couple. I mean, what if your spouse is like, let's go to the bar tonight? And you're like, oh, I can't do that. And they're like, why not?
When children come, that's one area of a lot of contention. Because then the decision is, okay, whose church do they go to? Do they go to my church one week and your church the next week? If one person believes in sending their children to a Christian school of their faith, and the other one doesn't have that,
and public school is free, and
public school, exactly. So where's the child going to go?
Right.
So when children come into the equation, there is a lot of conflict. Confused people don't do anything. And so what happens to a lot of children who grew up in homes where their parents are of different faith, they don't have any faith. They become unchurched. And for many of my friends who ended up marrying outside of their faith, that's when their marriage broke up, when they had children. And the children became of school age. Then there were all these contentions.
And the investment, all these years, and now you break up over that. It's like, can't imagine. It's really sad.
Yeah.
But Ma, let me be upfront with you, right? I've met some incredible guys who aren't of my faith. It's really unfortunate.
Have I considered this? Absolutely. It's crazy though, because sometimes you find like the strongest chemistry or connection with people who are outside of the faith.
But I had to really tell myself, I have to trust the process. I have to trust that God had a reason for being so explicit about that in the Bible. And like, Lord, man, you better have something good waiting for me, because
listen, God knows best.
I think if God is a very important part of your life and you can't share that with someone, it will start to clash. Because I think after all the butterfly feelings and all that is gone, you really are left with you guys' values. And if you can't uphold that, you're just not going to be happy.
Yeah.
Like if prayer is a big part of your life and you feel like the person that you want to be with isn't praying for you when you're going through hard times, and he's just like, I've been in that situation before, and it's like, it's just, when everything's all said and done, it's just not something that works out.
It is never wise to deliberately go against something God expressly says in his word we should not do.
Right. But I mean,
and we cannot expect him to bless it. Because I have a friend who says to me, oh, God always sends them so that I can, he sends the fish so I can clean them up.
What?
Oh, I know, I can catch the fish so he can clean them up. And I'm like, I don't know how you get that from the Bible, because that's just rationalization, rationalization. Because in my experience, many of the people who marry outside of their faith or marry someone who doesn't really have any Christian faith, they're more like unchurched, it's always the person who is more spiritual that waters down their faith to match the other one. Almost every time. That's what I've seen.
True. There's always someone has to submit, and someone has to
all
be dominant.
Things tend towards equilibrium.
Right.
That's a law of life. And usually it's the person who's more spiritual whose spirituality goes down to match the other person.
Then the question is, what are you willing to give up you know, and then that kind of speaks to your relationship with your God.
I read something, I was reading upon a relationship thing, and this lady says, your relationship, the person you choose to be in relationship with, is a reflection of your relationship with God. Oof. I thought that was profound.
We could sit on that for a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. Is intimate kissing while dating okay for Christians? Ooh.
Well, it's like, you know, how close can we toe the line? How many times can I pet the bear before he mauls me?
You know, I think Song of Solomon kind of puts it best. He says, you know what, don't let the love passions awaken until it's time. And I think kissing brings out those passions. Yeah. And if you awaken that before it's time, then you got to deal with more than just, hey, is this the right person? You got to deal with, you know, why aren't I with this person? Yeah. Why can't I spend time with this person right now? And maybe it might not awaken the same desires in the other person. And then you got a conflict, and it just causes all kinds of havoc in your life.
You know, when you start down that road of intimacy with somebody, the last thing you want to do is stop, you know. So, and it's so easy to cross the line, you know. It's you know, your willpower is only so strong. So you know, you have to know yourself, you have to know the other individual, and it's better to just not go there. And because you don't want any regrets.
I think it also throws a layer of complication in there to where you should be focused on, do I actually really enjoy this person, not the physical feelings I get when I'm being intimate, you know, like do I really see myself as enjoying, because beauty can fade, youth can fade, all those things that you think you're all attracted to in the beginning, and then you're left with the person, the real person.
For me, I was thinking about this because it's such a challenging area when you're in a relationship, because all of your desires don't just go on hold because you're not married. Yeah. They're all there and asserting their presence. But then when you start venturing there, it's really hard to put boundaries or because chemistry doesn't care about all of our faith beliefs. I mean, you know, but I know that that there's a scripture that says it's better for a man not to touch a woman, you know, when you're not married. And it sounds so prude and so whatever, but here's the thing. I think it's really just a respect for biology. Yeah.
Our bodies are made to respond to certain things without conscious volition. Okay. There are certain things that you do or that's done to you that just evoke response from a different part of your brain than you control consciously.
There's all the intimacy without the protection of the marriage, and there's all the insecurity, and there's this soul tied to this person that you're not in that kind of connection with. And so it's a protection on you and your emotions and what marriage is intended to be, to not get into sexuality outside of marriage, because it can be so damaging and it's so confusing. Mm-hmm. So I think as far as you know, asking, you know, where are the boundaries and what, you know, is a peck on the cheek or is hand out and all that, I think that it still goes back to being led by the Spirit, because people are so different, and what arouses them and what makes them, you know, feel a certain way is very different. You know, one person touching them on the shoulder might be like, hey, you know, and another person, they might have, you know, a very low inclination. And so they, you know, holding hands or kissing, whatever, is not really that, you know, weighty to them. And so I think that just respecting sexuality is really the valuable thing, not a certain set behavior, but an awareness of, until I'm married to this person, they're a brother or sister in Christ. They may eventually marry somebody else who is a brother and sister in Christ also. We may all go to the same church together. As a brother and sister, how do I treat them with love and respect, even if I feel the attraction? Because right now, that's not part of the equation, and they could belong to someone else. And how I interact with them is going to influence their future marriage.
I wish I learned that before, because in different cultures, you know, they're, I mean, different how they pushing you on the situation of relationships and stuff like that. In the Latino community, my culture, I mean, when you like early age, 12, whatever, I mean, it's like, oh, your girlfriend's coming, you know, something like pushing you. You watch those soap operas, you know, kissing and all the stuff all over the place. But let me tell you, what I learned is, what is the last phrase when the priest or a pastor, they had the ceremony when people are married, what is the last phrase that they tell them?
You may now kiss the bride.
So it is an action or a question?
It's an action.
It's an action. So let me tell you, now it's just like, so that means before that, you couldn't.
Oh.
That's what I learned. And I'm like, wow, wow. Are you interested? Because let me tell you, you go to the pastor for what? For a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't want the blessing, you're going to go Las Vegas and like, whoever is going to bless, you know, get married. So you go over there to ask him for a blessing. And for the last, check this out, the last 1 hour ceremony, the seal of that ceremony, like, is over. And the Jewish community, I think they break stuff, you know, plates or something, or something like that. And of course they're kissing and stuff, but the last thing is a kiss. That they seal that ceremony, like, this is okay now. Boom. And then after the kiss, the pastor says, now I present you Mrs. and, you know, whatever the last name and stuff like that. So I learned that, and I'm like, wow, interesting.
Then you know, okay, can this person respect my wish? Because if you don't respect one of my wishes, then it's very possible you may not respect others of my wishes. I know of a young lady, a friend of mine, who said when she met this guy, and when she told the guy, you know, all of this is off the table until I say I do, you put a ring on my finger and all of this. And the man said to her, you know, I'm not used to this. But when I think about it, I really respect you for it. And he had to think about it for a while. He thought like a week and a half before he called her back. And when he called her back, it was to commend her on the stance that she had taken. And to decide, you know, I need to get to know a little bit more about your faith. Because he was a Christian, but of a different faith. But I was just talking to her. So now he's looking into her faith and trying to figure out what makes her so different. He's like, I've never met a woman like you before. You know, so when you take these positions, God has a way of opening the eyes of people to see this person is following my law, not just to the letter, but in the spirit of it, which is what he asks us to do.
Yeah, my daughter will be locked up until she's at least 25, so, you know.
I mean, I told my daughter, I was like, PhD.
That's right.
Get your PhD first. You know, that's all I'm asking.
What advice would you give a dating couple? The do's and the don'ts.
Okay, so here's some advice. This is what my dad told me. It's like, you should never kiss a girl unless you intend on marrying her.
That's good advice.
I took that advice.
Wow.
So the only girl I ever kissed was my wife.
Wow. That's awesome. You have nothing to compare to.
I don't.
I think that is the beauty of operating like God asks us.
Yeah.
If you're dating, you want to make sure that most of the time you spend together is also in the company of other people. So you don't want to be just the two of you together all the time. Things are going to get out of hand. The topics are going to change. Do things in groups. You go places in groups, you attend functions in groups, you go to your homes, different homes. Make sure that there are always a lot of people and you're observing the other person in the situation.
Do give her flowers. Do write her letters. Man, I know it doesn't seem like a big deal for guys. Like, we're like, well, come on, pick a flower and give it to her. Like, are you see it? Girls appreciate that thing. And it's just, And it does work both ways. I noticed. I never thought I cared about any of that stuff. I was just like, I want to do whatever makes my wife happy, and I never felt like I needed anything like that. But I remember my wife will do things like when I go to the car in the morning, there's like a snack or something like chocolate and a letter that just says I love you, and I'm like, wow, like my wife literally took time. She was thinking about me while she was out, and she got that thing and she wrote that note and thought to secretly put it in my car so that I would see it. It made me feel good.
I guess it'd do as well when it gets serious, counseling.
Oh yeah.
The other one, don't test the other person like after, 9, 10 p.m. Because, later on, testing or something late at night, just you by yourself, stuff like that. Or don't send pictures.
Yeah.
Nowadays you hear all stuff, don't send pictures, and depends how old is the person. Nowadays, 14, 15, they have a little boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. But if you want to have a healthy, organic relationship, tell your parents, don't be hidden that relationship from your parents. So I guess the do is bring to the house.
Yeah.
Come to know it, like, hey, this is the person, and the healthy relationship, and like I said, it's nice to have boundaries, and just to have a good, healthy relationship.
I think don't date someone if you feel like you have something missing in your life.
You are handling another person's heart. For me, some do's and don'ts of dating is to consider that this is a person's heart that is fragile and vulnerable, and the way I interact with them can be very destructive or can be very positive and healing, even if you don't end up dating. Yeah. And I think having some conversations in preparation for how to navigate before you're in the dates. And I think that knowing that someone is an individual of value beyond the dating connection is huge. And I think that getting good advice from people who have healthy relationships so that you have a context when you go out for dating, so that you have kind of a template for how to treat another person and handle different scenarios and stuff, so that you don't unnecessarily bring damage to people and they to you.
Well, one of my advice gonna be don't easily make promises. I think don't easily make promises to the other one. The words you speak out is very important.
Yeah.
My top do's in relationship is number one, to have boundaries. I think it is important. I think one thing that I haven't done enough is to say, no, I'm not comfortable with that. No, I don't want to do that. This is really important to me, and to stand on that. I think it's important to that both persons have a individual relationship with God as well. I think too often we can kind of just rely too much on somebody else's faith and where they're at, and they pour into us. We don't know how to pour back into them. And I think that comes from having individual relationships with God. My top don't is to number one, probably just my only one, is literally to not rush anything physical.
Do not awaken love before it's time.
No, like even if it becomes something as simple as kissing, I think if you're going to spend so much of your time with somebody and that's going to be part of the relationship, why just rush through that? Yeah. I think just focus more on spending time with each other and getting to know each other and enjoying each other's presence, because this is not just the person you're going to sleep with. This is the person that you're going to go grocery shopping with and do all types of stuff together. That could be like, just activities, family vacations, all of that. So I think that's super important.
And when you look at the percentage of time you're going to spend, it's going to be a very small percentage of time that's with the physical, and then a large percentage of time that it's getting ready for work and doing chores and taking care of kids and all of that. So we kind of have that in reverse, don't we, and what we value,
Yeah.
So the things that you do is you do things that will allow you to get to know the other person. You do things that will enhance your communication. You do things that you can grow with together as you do them, you do things that will build your spiritual relationship, your spiritual intimacy with God.
We talked about knowing and understanding yourself, and I think when it comes to dating, each person should know and understand how they want to be treated, how they would like the other person to be within reason, and also how to communicate those things to that other person. I think dating is the best place to learn how to cultivate that, because it's not just you communicating with them, it's learning how to communicate to them in the way that they understand, and vice versa.
One way to find out is also to listen to the words they use. If you're talking about something and you make a point and someone says, "Oh, I see," usually that person is visual. Just look at the words that they use. Wow. If they're using a lot of visual type words, they're usually visual. If you're talking to somebody and you say, "Are you listening to me?" and they say, "I hear you." "Yeah, I hear you." That person usually would be more auditory. Now we all have all of those things in us, but one is usually predominant. There are a few of us where they kind of equal, so we just interchange words. And then if you are explaining something to someone and the person like, "Man, that grabbed me so deeply," that person is usually kinesthetic. So a lot of times we give away the way we actually communicate best in the words that we use.
Does a minimum time come to mind, dating period before marrying someone?
Some of the best advice that someone ever gave me was see your significant other throughout all seasons before you commit to marrying them. And that means a lot of different things. Not only it doesn't mean, spend a full year of dating with them, but it also means see them through their happiness, see them through their sadness, see them if they have depression, see them if they are joyful and what they're happy about. All the seasons of their personality.
There's an old saying, I think it's an Indian saying, of don't marry somebody until you have summered and wintered with them. You've seen them in their best and then you've seen them in their worst, because then you see the whole package deal.
You see what you're getting.
Yeah.
Well, I think for younger people, a year is fine. 2 years, depending on how young you are. For older people, I don't think there's any time frame, because by then you should have figured out how to assess people. If you've done your inside work, 6 months, 1 year, it's fine.
All right.
But none of this 5-year thing. If you're dating someone for 2 years and you don't know that you want to be with that person, or if you're a female and the male has not proposed to you, keep walking. Do not invest more than 2 years of your time with any one person.
Time is precious.
If I break up with someone because I feel like Jesus told me to, is that biblical? Why do I still want them back?
If you feel like you should break up with someone because God or Jesus told you to, you better pray about it and base that on something that is hard and fast. And I even say from the Bible, because you can have a desire to continue and think that's from Christ, or you can have a desire and think that it's not for someone, not for you, because Jesus is telling you that. But it might not be Jesus telling you that. It might be your own heart.
Okay, when I look at this person, their characteristics, their mannerisms, the things that they want me to do, those things are not in line with how God says I should behave in the Bible, then yes, Jesus told you to do so. But sometimes there are some of us who don't want to do certain things, and then we'll say, Jesus told me I shouldn't do that. Or the Holy Spirit says I shouldn't do that. When in essence, it's we didn't want to do something, or we didn't want to come up front and actually communicate on a deeper level about the thing. So if you're just hiding behind the phrase Jesus told me to do so, then that's not biblical.
I think we need to be careful when we say Jesus told me to, because sometimes that can also be toxic for someone else to hear and can hinder them in their relationship.
They're like, Jesus doesn't like me. He told that girl to break up with me.
Exactly. And that was something that I had to deal with that afterwards, and I felt so bad. I didn't know what to do. And so I think that it's important just to be like, you know what, this just isn't working out and we just don't fit together. you know, or I need to focus more on my spiritual life or something like that. But I think it is a valid reason, because if God tells us to do something, it's for our good. And especially if we're feeling the effects of that, we should let it go.
There's probably some principles here that need to be thought about. And people like to phrase their questions this way a lot. So then this is not a reflection on anybody. So I just noticed, just generally, we like to use the word feel instead of the word think. And God really wants us to think our way through situations, not necessarily feel our way through situations. Feelings are unstable. They will take us in all manner of directions. What we need to be able to do is reason through the situation. That the thoughts should control the feelings. So feelings subject to thoughts. That's really the hierarchy of things, not the other way around.
That's tough. Interesting though, I've never heard it phrased that way, that God told me to break up with you. I've heard a bunch of, God told me that you're the one for me, like let's get together. And my response to that is always, if he's gonna go ahead and tell you, he's gonna tell me too.
That's right.
And I'm remembering like Joseph and Mary, you know, the angel came down and he had a conversation with Mary, and he definitely flew over to Joseph before he went back to heaven. Like there was communication for both of them.
And also with Manoah.
Manoah?
Samson's parents. Samson's mother was in the field doing whatever work she was doing when the angel appeared to her first. She went home and she told Manoah, and Manoah prayed and like, okay, Lord, whoever it is that spoke to my, send that person to speak to me. And the angel went and spoke to him too.
That's right.
So God is not going to speak to one person without telling the other person.
But it may not work the other way around, is what I'm saying, because depending on people's connection to Christ, some people might be living in sin and their guilty conscience has been removed. Like they're not hearing the voice of God. But if you're in that kind of situation and God is actually impressing upon your heart that, hey, this is not right, there are ways to make sure that it's the voice of God and not the voice of Satan or even your own reservations. And there's three common ways. So just in general to know whether your thoughts are of God.
He can tell you through principles in his word, like as you're reading, this is the kind of person I want for you. And you're looking at the person that you're with and you're saying, this doesn't add up. You know, God can, I believe, speak to you directly. He did that in my case. You know, he spoke to my mind and said these very specific words, and I knew.
But then the third one is mentors, people who love and care for you. The conversations that you have is another way to confirm whether what you're thinking is true. Pray and ask God, Lord, especially when you're talking to people, your parents, whatnot, please speak to that person. Go and ask them, what do you think of my partner? Do you think that we're a good fit? Just ask for counsel and be ready for what the person tells you. And of course, make sure that to take what the person's telling you and of course back it up with scripture, make sure that they're sound in what they're saying. But I mean, I'm thinking of Gideon, you know, he saw an angel came and visited him, but he was like, you know what? let me double check, let me triple check. And he put out his fleece, and the fleece can look different for different people. But the point is God is willing to answer. This is one of the biggest decisions in life. Go ahead and ask God multiple times and ask for that confirmation. And when you get the answer, go through with it. You know, if it is to walk away, walk away. Yeah.
Trust God, because when he closes one door, he opens another door or a window. And when he opens the window, jump through it.
That's right.
Why you would want that person back? Well, because emotions are very strong, and you've done things together that are, you know, binding, giving you butterflies and this euphoria feeling that's addictive. Like these chemicals in your brain that get released, endorphins and all these things, those are an addictive feeling. You want to feel that way, and when that one person makes you feel that way, it's almost like being blinded. Like you feel like, oh, it's only this one person in the world that can make me feel like that. But that's not true. You know, God can give you, believe me, if this person makes you feel that way and that's not the one God has for you, then the one he has for you is going to be awesome and perfect. I believe that.
And to answer, why do I still want them back? Because you made a connection with that person. Like, it's not like you just, if God tells you don't, like, to let something go, it's not like we don't have an emotional attachment to it or that it's just like a light switch and we can turn our feelings off. Because I struggled with going back and forth and it just caused more damage. Like, I think the best thing to do is, like, if God tells you to do something, just like hold his hand through the process and don't try to, like, you know, go back to something that he clearly said is not for you. So yeah, it ends up hurting both persons.
Thank you, Mama. We got through it. Boom.
Well, we hope you guys were edified by today's love topics. These were really good questions. There was a lot of questions there. What do you guys think about this? I mean, put some questions in the comments below and engage with us a little bit and tell us what you kind of thought about the way that we answered some of those. And maybe if you have some thoughts of your own, we would love to hear them and love to share them.
Yeah, we can do it again.
Thanks for the questions, guys, and please continue to send more questions to us.
And thank you so much for your love and support. Without you guys, we could not do this show. We thank you so much for your prayers. And if you want to financially support this ministry, you can go to patreon.com, or you can even donate through our website, which actually helps us even more. That's lls.tv/donate.
Don't forget to support in social media and Facebook, Instagram, and all the platforms. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. Bye.